Useless old man. That's what my own son called me. Not in anger, not whispered behind my back, but right there at the Sunday table with everyone listening. His voice carried across the plates of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and fresh bread I had baked that very morning. The laughter died down for a moment. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, shifted uncomfortably in her chair, shooting him a warning glance. My grandsons, Jacob and Ethan, kept eating, too young to understand, too focused on their food. But me? I froze. The fork trembled slightly in my hand. I set it down slowly, making sure no one saw. I chewed what was left in my mouth. Tough chicken, suddenly harder to swallow, and kept my face calm. "Michael," Sophia whispered, "don't say that." He smirked as if brushing her off. "I'm just saying the truth. Dad doesn't understand how things work anymore. He's old. He can't keep up." He chuckled. "He's kind of useless now, isn't he?" The chuckle cut deeper than the words, because laughter, that cruel, dismissive sound, has a way of slicing through pride sharper than any blade. I wiped my mouth with the napkin, forced a faint smile, and said softly, "Maybe you're right, Michael." That was it. No raised voice, no scene, just silence. But inside, something cracked. I looked across the table at my son, my boy, the one I once carried on my shoulders when his legs were too short to keep up. The boy who had clung to my hand when he was afraid of the dark. And now, that same boy, grown into a man with a sharp suit, an expensive watch, and the arrogance of someone who thought life was under his control, looked at me as if I were nothing more than a burden. I caught Sophia's eyes for a brief second. She lowered her gaze, ashamed. And in that silence, I realized no one, not her, not even my grandchildren, was going to defend me. The rest of the meal passed in forced conversation. Jacob spilled his juice. Ethan asked for more chicken. Sophia tried to smooth over the tension with small talk. Michael laughed with her as if nothing had happened, but the word kept echoing. Useless. When the plates were cleared, I carried my own to the sink, my steps heavy. "Leave it, Dad, we'll clean later," Sophia said politely, but I shook my head. My hands needed to move. My chest was too tight. Later that afternoon, after they had left, I sat on my old rocking chair on the porch. The wood creaked under me, the same chair I had built with my own hands decades ago. The sunset painted the sky in soft orange, but all I saw was Michael's face when he said those words. Useless. I remembered the boy who once drew me a crooked picture of a hammer and a house, writing under it, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be like you." I kept that paper for years, tucked inside a book. Did he remember? Or had he buried it beneath the piles of contracts, loans, and responsibilities that now defined him? That night, I didn't sleep. I made coffee at 3 a.m, bitter and black, stronger than usual. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. On the wall hung the old set of keys, front door, back door, garage gate. I stared at them for a long time. A thought came to me, slow at first, then sharp as lightning. Why do I keep leaving every door open? Why do I keep allowing them to walk in, eat my food, sit at my table, insult me, and I just keep smiling like a fool? The house was mine. Every brick, every nail, every beam of wood. I had built it, paid for it, maintained it. And yet, I realized, somewhere along the way, Michael had started to believe it was his too. He came and went as he pleased, brought his family, made decisions as if the roof over our heads was his to command. But it wasn't. The house was mine. My sweat, my labor, my story. By dawn, the decision was made. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I would remind my son who truly held the keys. I placed my mug down, the last drops of coffee cold and bitter on my tongue. I whispered into the silence of the kitchen, as if Margaret, my late wife, could hear me still. "Tomorrow, love, I'll do what must be done." And as the first light of morning broke through the curtains, I picked up the set of keys from the wall, weighing them in my hand. But what I planned to do with them, that was something no one in my family would ever expect. The weight of those keys in my palm felt heavier than ever before. They weren't just pieces of metal anymore. They were symbols of every door I had left wide open, every insult I had swallowed, every moment I had allowed myself to be invisible in my own home. The first light of morning filtered through the curtains. I put on my best shirt, the navy one Margaret used to say brought out the color of my eyes, and I stepped outside. The air was crisp, filled with the smell of wet earth from last night's rain. I walked straight down the street to the locksmith's shop. The bell above the door jingled, and young Daniel, the locksmith, looked up from his workbench. "Mr. Bennett, you're up early." "I need every lock changed," I said, firm, no hesitation. "Front door, back door, garage gate, everything." He blinked, surprised. "All of them? Is everything all right?" I met his eyes and gave the smallest of nods. "It's time." By noon, Daniel and his apprentice were at my house, replacing lock after lock. I watched closely, almost ceremonially, as the old brass cylinders were removed and replaced with gleaming new ones. The sound of drills and screwdrivers echoed through the hallways like a strange kind of music, one that only I understood. When the last lock clicked into place, Daniel handed me a brand new set of keys. They felt cold and sharp against my skin, like a reset button for my entire life. "Keep these safe," Daniel said with a polite smile. I gave him a small grin in return, safer than anything else. After they left, silence filled the house. Not the heavy silence of loneliness, but the empowering kind. I sat on the porch, rocking slowly, the new keys dangling from my hand. The afternoon sun warmed my face as I whispered to myself, "Let's see who knocks now." For the next 2 days, no one came, no calls, no visits. The house stayed quiet, and though part of me enjoyed the peace, another part wondered when the first test would come. Because it would come, I knew my son too well. Michael was not a man who liked closed doors. He was used to barging in, used to control, used to seeing me bend. On the third day, just as the clock in the kitchen struck noon, I heard it, the sharp buzz of the doorbell, pressed too long, too impatient. My heart kicked in my chest, but I didn't move right away. I let it ring. Then came the knock, loud, insistent. "Dad?" Michael's voice carried through the door. "Why did you change the locks? What's going on?" I stood quietly behind the curtain, watching his silhouette shift on the porch. He tried again, softer this time. "Dad, come on, open the door. We need to talk." The phone rang inside, the landline that hardly ever made a sound anymore. I knew it was him. I let it ring until it stopped. His shadow lingered a while longer before fading down the walkway. That evening, as I sat back in my rocking chair, the text came through. "This isn't the way to handle things. Call me." I stared at the glowing screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. But instead of answering, I turned the phone face down on the table. Because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the next time Michael came to my door, he wouldn't come alone. I kept the phone face down after his text. The porch boards breathed under my rocking chair, and the new keys glinted on the table like a small pile of moonlight. I'd told myself I was ready for the next knock. I just hadn't decided what to do when it came with little hands and familiar voices. It arrived before noon the next day. 3 quick rings, too long on the 4th. Like someone rehearsing patience and failing. I stood behind the curtain and watched Michael's outline shift from heel to heel. He pressed his forehead to the glass and cupped his hands, trying to see past his own reflection. "Dad?" His voice tried on concern. "Are you okay? Why'd you change the locks?" I let the quiet answer for me. The kitchen clock kept time with a dry tick. In the hallway, Margaret's photograph caught a thin bar of light across her smile. He tried the landline. I let it ring. He tried again, then again. On the 4th try, I lifted the receiver, listened to the click of the line connecting, and set it back down without a word. I wasn't being cruel. I was learning to speak in a language he understood. Boundaries. "Fine," he muttered on the porch, "if that's how you want it." His steps faded down the walkway. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. By late afternoon, new footsteps came, softer, hesitant. I knew them even before the doorbell, Sophia's careful approach and the quick, skipping rhythm of my grandson's. I held my breath as Jacob's small palm slapped the wood. "Grandpa, it's me," he chirped. "We brought cake." Sophia's voice floated up, brightened with effort. "Mr. Bennett, we thought we'd stop by if that's okay." I leaned my forehead against the door, and in that small stretch of wood between us lay every good thing I'd ever taught my son, and every lesson he'd refused to learn. Through the peephole I caught Ethan's crown of hair and the streak of a soccer ball held under his arm. It hurt, immediate and old. I swallowed it. "Maybe he's asleep," Sophia told them, loud enough for me to hear. "We'll come back." "Can we wait?" Jacob asked. "Just 5 minutes?" 5 minutes became 10. Ethan sat on the top step and began tracing circles in the dust with the toe of his shoe. When his head dropped and his shoulders rounded, the ache in my chest turned a slow key. I almost opened. Almost. But I had measured their heights on the kitchen doorway for years. I had cooked their favorite pancakes, found the lost shoe, fixed the loose wheel. Respect had not followed. What had? Convenience. I could not open the door for convenience and call it love. Sophia finally stood. "Okay, boys, let's go." She glanced at the window, eyes shining. I stepped back from the curtain so she wouldn't see the shape of me there. If I opened now, everything I'd said by not opening would be undone. The house settled again. Dusk deepened the rooms until the furniture became the memory of furniture. I brewed coffee and drank it black, standing in the doorway where pencil marks still notched the growth of my children. Michael at 5, Michael at 7, Claire at 9 with a crooked line because she'd leaned. When the streetlights hummed on, another car rolled to a stop at the curb. This engine idled differently, cooler, patient. Headlights cut a pale blade across my garden and pinned the porch rail in light. I did not move until the engine clicked off and the car surrendered to quiet. Then I went to the door and stood very still. Footsteps, 3 sets this time, and not little. One belonged to my son, brisk, slightly outward on the right foot ever since he'd twisted his ankle in 8th grade. One was Sophia's. The third had a careful weight I recognized from a lifetime of carpenters and men who wear offices the way others wear coats. They didn't ring right away. They spoke, low and fast, enough to make syllables without making words. I caught one word anyway, paperwork, and another, title. A minute later, the doorbell sounded, brief, polite, a stranger's ring at a familiar door. "Dad," Michael called. "Can we talk, please?" Sophia added softly, "Mr. Bennett, we won't take long." I stayed where I was, my hand a breath above the deadbolt. Through the peephole, I saw a sliver of a dark coat and the corner of a leather case glinting in the porch light. Not a grocery bag, not a toy for the boys. A case. The kind that creaks when opened and smells faintly of ink. "Sir?" A new voice, measured, courteous in the way of men who need signatures. "Good evening, I'm Harrison." My palm tingled against the cold metal. There was a time in my life when I would have opened the door because someone used the right tone. There was a time when I believed courtesy was the same thing as respect. "Dad," Michael tried again, the edge returning to his words. "You can't ignore us. We just need to fix a simple problem. It'll take 5 minutes." 5 minutes, 5 years, 5 signatures. How long had I traded minutes for pieces of myself? I let the question hang in the air between the wood grain and my breath. On the hallway table, the new keys lay coiled like bright fish hooks. I remembered the day I taught Michael to turn a lock, how his small hand rested on mine, and how he'd whispered awed, "It listens to you." "It listens to whoever holds the key," I had told him. "Sir," Harrison coaxed, "if you'd prefer, we can speak out here." I slid the chain across with a whisper and opened the door 2 inches, no more, until the limit caught and held. 3 faces tilted toward the gap. Michael's jaw was tight. Sophia's mouth was a line of apology. Harrison's eyes were cool and professional above the shine of his case. "Evening," I said, and my voice sounded like the hinge it passed through. Old, oiled, sure. Michael lifted a sheaf of papers, edges squared. "It's simple, Dad. Just a couple of signatures." "Simple," I repeated, and the word felt like a splinter. Harrison unfolded the top page so I could see the heading without touching it. I didn't lean closer. I watched their eyes instead. The flicker in Michael's when he mistook my silence for surrender. The quick glance Sophia gave him, warning. The stillness of the man who brings pens to a father's door after dusk. Somewhere in the back of the house, the coffee maker cracked as it cooled. I let the sound fill the space that their words were trying to claim. "Not tonight," I said. Harrison inclined his head, courteous again. "Of course. Tomorrow then?" Michael pushed. "Tomorrow morning. Early." I closed the gap one slow inch. "We'll see," I said, and let the chain hold the rest. Their faces drew back from the seam of light. Shoes shuffled. The leather case creaked as it shifted. On the far end of the porch rail, a moth beat its wings against the bulb until it found a way to circle without burning. Their footsteps retreated down the stairs. The engine turned over and the night collected itself. I slid the chain free and shut the door the rest of the way, felt the latch seat in its new home with a clean, decisive click. Tomorrow. They were certain of it. But tonight, in the cool kitchen, I set the papers they hadn't touched and the keys they couldn't claim side by side, and asked myself the only question that mattered before morning. Which door should I close next, and which one would I dare to open? Morning broke gray and heavy, the kind of sky that promises rain without ever delivering it. I had slept in fragments, 20 minutes here, half an hour there, until finally I gave up and boiled water for coffee. The new keys lay on the kitchen table, a small pile of steel, while the words from the night before lingered like smoke. Title, signature, transfer. I sat there with the cup warming my palms and realized something. Silence had been enough when the insult was only a word. But when paper arrived at my door, silence would no longer protect me. Paper had weight, paper had claws, and paper could strip me of everything if I let it. By 8 o'clock I was already dressed. White shirt, pressed slacks. The jacket Margaret had once insisted made me look respectable. I tucked my worn folder under my arm. Old documents, yellowed receipts, the original deed to this house I had guarded for decades. My hands trembled slightly as I locked the door behind me. For the first time since Margaret passed, I felt like I wasn't walking just for myself, but for her too. The courthouse was only 6 blocks away, though it felt like miles. Every step echoed with the memory of Michael's words. Every shadow seemed to whisper, "They're going to take it from you." Inside, the registry office smelled of paper, ink, and floor polish. I waited in line, the hum of fluorescent lights above me, until finally a young woman with glasses called me forward. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" I laid the folder on her desk, careful, deliberate. "I need to check the title to my property. Arthur Bennett, house on Willow Lane. And I need to know if there's a way to prevent anyone from touching it, without me." She typed briskly, her nails clicking against the keys. One moment. Her eyes scanned the screen. Then she looked up. "Yes, Mr. Bennett. The property is still fully in your name. No liens, no transfers." Relief rushed through me, but it was short-lived. But could someone try? Could someone pressure me? Bring papers for me to sign? She adjusted her glasses, her tone softening. "They could try, sir. But nothing changes without your signature. However, if you want absolute protection, we can file a preventive block. That way, no transaction can happen unless a judge clears it. Even your signature won't be enough unless you remove the block yourself." Her words settled on me like armor. A preventive block, a wall higher than any lock. I nodded slowly. "I want that. Today." She smiled kindly, slid the form across. "Of course. Sign here and here." I held the pen tightly, my hand steady for the first time in days. Each stroke of ink felt like a hammer driving a nail into place. When I finished, she stamped the document with a heavy, satisfying thud. "That's it," she said. "No one can touch your home now." I walked out of that building taller than I had entered. The folder under my arm was heavier, but in a good way. Inside was proof that the house Margaret and I had built, the house where my children had taken their first steps, was untouchable. Back home, I set the stamped document on the kitchen table. The afternoon sun lit up the ink, and I smiled for the first time in a long while. I whispered to the empty room, "You hear that, Margaret? They can't take it. Not from me. Not from you." But peace doesn't last long when greed is waiting outside your door. At 4 p.m., and the familiar sound of Michael's car pulled into the driveway. I didn't move right away. I let the engine cut off, let the silence stretch, until finally there was the slam of a door, steps, voices. "Dad!" Michael's call was sharper this time. Sophia trailed behind, her face tense, carrying nothing but her own unease. He marched to the porch and knocked hard. "We need to talk, now." I rose slowly, my hand brushing the folder on the table. I carried it with me, walked to the door, and opened it just enough to stand framed in the doorway. Michael's face was flushed, frustration painted on every line. "Dad, why didn't you answer? We've been worried. Look, the lawyer said—" I raised the folder so he could see the official seal stamped across the page. His words caught in his throat. Sophia gasped softly. "This," I said, my voice steady, "says no one can touch this house. No one. Not you, not your lawyer, not anyone." Michael's jaw tightened. He reached a hand out as if to grab the paper, but I stepped back. "Don't! This isn't yours!" Sophia's eyes glistened, her lips parting as if to speak, but Michael cut across her. "Dad, you don't understand. We need this." "No," I interrupted louder than I meant, the echo ringing through the hallway. "What you need and what you want are two different things. And what I need is respect." And the silence that followed was thick, broken only by the ticking of the clock inside. Michael looked at me, truly looked, and for the first time I saw something flicker in his expression. Hesitation, maybe even fear. I closed the door slowly, the sound of the latch sealing like a verdict. From the other side, I heard Michael's muffled curse, Sophia's hushed plea for him to stop, and their retreating steps down the porch. Back in the kitchen, I laid the document flat on the table, smoothing it with my palm. For the first time in years, I felt in control again. But control is a fragile thing. And as night fell, I found myself staring at the door, wondering what they would try next, and whether I was ready for it. I left the stamped paper on the kitchen table like a lantern. Its seal glowed in the last of the daylight and told me I'd done one thing right. The house was safe. Still, when the night pressed its face to the windows, safety felt smaller than I hoped. The new locks were quiet. My thoughts were not. I brewed coffee I didn't need and walked the hallway where pencil marks still measured the rise of my children. Michael at 5, Michael at 7. Claire at 9, her line crooked because she'd laughed and leaned. I touched that notch with one finger, the way a man checks the edge on a blade he hasn't used in years. Headlights brushed the curtains, slow, careful, not Michael's hurry. I set the cup down, wiped my palms on my slacks, and waited. The doorbell chimed once, not impatient, not demanding. If a bell can knock politely, it did. "Who is it?" I asked, though I already knew. "It's me, Dad." Claire's voice has always carried a kind of soft authority, like a nurse telling pain it won't last. I slid the chain and opened the door. She stepped in with the night air clinging to her coat, her cheeks pink from the drive, her hair pinned back the way she wears it in the ward. She didn't speak at first. She crossed the room, set her bag down, and put both hands around my forearms as if taking a pulse, checking that I was really there. "I heard," she said finally. "From who?" "From everyone." She smiled sadly. Small towns run on coffee and rumors. And she saw the document on the table and nodded like a colleague approving a chart. "Good. About time you remembered who the patient is." "I'm not sick," I said. "No," she said, squeezing my arm. "You remembered that you're alive." We sat in the kitchen where sunlight used to pool under Margaret's geraniums. I poured coffee. She took hers black like her mother. Steam rose between us, a little blessing. For a while, we spoke around the thing, about the weather, the drive, how the pear tree out back was leaning and would need a brace before winter. Then she set her cup down with a precise nurse's click that meant we had arrived. "What did he want the deed for, Dad?" she asked. "A loan," I said. Convenience dressed like necessity. Claire's mouth thinned. "He told Sophia it was just paperwork. She called me yesterday from the grocery store, said Michael looked tired, angry, like a man who can't find the door he's certain is there." I nodded toward the keys. "He found it. It's just not his." We fell into a silence that wasn't empty. It was the kind you earn after years of telling the truth to someone who knows how to hear it. She rose, wandered to the doorway with the pencil scars, and traced the crooked line with her thumb. "I remember this," she said. "You said, 'Hold still, or you'll always be leaning.'" I laughed and moved anyway. She looked back at me. Maybe leaning saved me. Maybe it taught me to look around the corners Michael runs past. She came back, slid into the chair opposite, and lowered her voice. "Sophia didn't say it straight, but I think there's more. Something pressing, something he doesn't want to name." "So he brought a man who names things for a living," I said. "Briefcase and pens and words that look clean when they're hungry." Claire smiled without joy. "You didn't sign." I filed a block. Her eyes glistened. "Good." We spoke of Margaret then, and the room changed temperature. Claire remembered the Christmas when the oven died and I finished the turkey on the grill in the snow while Margaret sang carols off-key. We laughed. It felt like opening a window that had been painted shut. "Mom would have liked this," Claire said, tapping the document. "Not because of the paper, because you chose yourself." I waited too long. She shook her head. "You waited until you knew why." Outside, the wind worried the camphor leaves. Somewhere a neighbor's dog arranged its blanket and was satisfied. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a folded square of newsprint, soft at the edges. "I found this when we cleaned the attic last year," she said. "I didn't show you then. I didn't want to make you sad." She slid it over, a photo of Margaret in her garden, laughing with her head thrown back, a blur of daisies behind her. On the margin, in Margaret's handwriting, a line I'd forgotten. "A home is not a place you enter. It's a respect you return." I put my hand over the ink as if it were a throat I could still warm. Claire watched me the way she watches the monitors at work, alert, hopeful, prepared for alarms. "I'm not angry at him," I said. "Not the way I thought I'd be. I'm angry at how easily I let laughing feel like love." Claire nodded. "Love laughs with you. It doesn't point and ask other people to laugh too." She stood and rinsed our cups the way Margaret used to, quiet, efficient, back-turned in the gentlest trust. I realized I was breathing evenly for the first time in days. "It will get harder before it gets easier," she said, setting the cups to dry. "If he came with paper once, he'll come with something else. He'll try another key." "I've got the locks," I said, touching the new metal gleam. "He knows that." She looked at me. "So he will try the door you don't want to guard." "Which one is that?" She held my gaze. "The one behind your ribcage." We didn't speak for a while. The house held us like an old hand holds a coin, warm from the keeping. Before she left, she walked to the front door and stood with her palm on the wood. "I used to listen for your steps when I had nightmares," she said. "You never ran. You just walked down the hall like you trusted the floor to be there. Do that again. Walk. Trust the floor." She kissed my cheek and stepped into the night. I watched her taillights until they turned the corner and were ordinary again. Sleep found me in pieces and stitched them together. I woke before dawn, the sky rinsed of color, the house making the small, faithful sounds of an old friend breathing. I was buttering toast when the landline rang, its mechanical bell startling the birds on the fence. I let it call twice, 3 times, the 4th ring lifting something inside me I didn't want lifted. I picked up. There was a silence on the line that wasn't empty. Then a voice I'd known since it first cried in a hospital room said, smaller than I remembered, "Dad, can I come over? No papers, just me." The phone was still warm against my ear when the silence after his words settled into the kitchen. No papers, just me. I set the receiver back on the hook and stared at the toast cooling on the plate. Butter glistened, untouched. For days I had dreamed of hearing humility in Michael's voice, and now that it had come, it felt strange, like a stranger wearing my son's face. All morning I paced the house. The new locks gleamed like soldiers at their posts. The preventive block rested inside its folder on the table, heavy and reassuring, and yet none of it kept my chest from tightening at the thought of Michael walking through the gate again. By mid-afternoon, his car rolled up to the curb, alone this time. No lawyer, no wife, just Michael. He stepped out slowly, jacket folded over his arm, his head slightly bowed. I noticed his shoes first, scuffed at the toe. My son never left the house without polished shoes. Something inside him had cracked. I opened the door before he knocked. His eyes lifted, surprised, but he said nothing at first. We stood there, father and son, two men bound by blood but separated by a canyon dug over years of silence. "May I?" he asked. His voice was softer, cautious. I nodded and stepped aside. Inside, the house seemed to hold its breath. He walked to the kitchen table, saw the folder with the registry's seal, and looked away quickly, ashamed. "I didn't come for that," he murmured. "Good," I said, sitting across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed, and somewhere outside a bird tapped against the gutter. Finally, Michael reached into his pocket and set something on the table between us. It was a leather keychain, old and worn, the stitching frayed, the brass ring dulled with time. My breath caught in my throat. "You remember this?" he asked. I picked it up with careful fingers. Of course I remembered. I had given it to him the day he got his first car, his first taste of freedom. I'd pressed the keychain into his palm and said, "This isn't just for keys, son. It's for responsibility, for respect." Now he slid it across the table like an offering. "I kept it all these years," he whispered, "but I forgot what it meant." The weight of it in my hand was heavier than steel. It carried all the nights I'd stayed awake waiting for him to come home safe, all the mornings I'd packed his lunch, all the sacrifices I never spoke of. "I was wrong, Dad," he continued. His eyes finally met mine, red-rimmed and wet. "I called you useless because it was easier than admitting I was drowning. The loan, the bills, the house, none of it mattered as much as making myself feel bigger. And I stepped on you to do it." His words cracked something open inside me, but not in the way insults do. This was different. This was raw, clumsy truth, the kind that makes a man tremble because it costs him pride. I let the silence stretch, because silence teaches. Then I said, steady and slow, "A father may close a door, Michael, but he never throws away the key." Tears spilled down his cheeks, and for once he didn't hide them. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking, and I realized I wasn't looking at a powerful man anymore. I was looking at the boy who once begged me not to leave his bedroom door cracked at night. I reached across, placed the keychain back in his palm, and closed his fingers over it. "You remember what this means?" He nodded, choking back a sob. "Then live like it." The moment held us both in a fragile balance. Part of me wanted to believe this was the turning point, that the locks and documents had forced him to see the truth. But another part knew wounds don't heal in one conversation. He wiped his face, stood and said, "Thank you for opening the door today." I didn't answer. I only watched him leave, the keychain clutched tightly in his fist. When the engine faded down the street, the house exhaled again. I sat alone at the table, staring at the spot where the keychain had rested, and thought, maybe this is the start of repair, or maybe it's another disguise. That night, as the crickets began their chorus, the doorbell rang again. I expected Michael, desperate for more words, but when I opened the door, it wasn't my son standing there. It was someone I hadn't seen in 15 years, someone whose absence had cut as deep as Michael's words ever had. And with that face on my porch, I realized the past hadn't finished knocking. When I pulled the door open, the night air swept in with her. Evelyn, my sister. 15 years had passed since I'd last seen her face, older now, lined in ways that mirrored my own. Her hair was silver at the temples, and her suitcase looked heavier than her frame could bear. For a second, I thought I was seeing a ghost, the kind that carries unfinished words instead of chains. "Arthur," she said. Just my name, but the way it broke in her throat told the whole story. I could have closed the door. God knows pride told me to. But something deeper, maybe the same blood we shared, maybe the echo of Margaret's voice reminding me not to harden completely, moved my hand instead. I stepped aside. "The house hasn't changed," she whispered, her eyes sweeping the hallway, the framed photos, the old rocking chair. "Neither have some of the wounds," I answered, sharper than I intended. She flinched but nodded. "That's why I'm here." We sat at the kitchen table, the same place Michael had cried only hours earlier. The folder with the registry stamp still rested there like a sentinel. Evelyn set her suitcase down, folded her hands, and stared at them. "You know why I stayed away," she said. "Because of the inheritance," I muttered. The words still tasted bitter after all these years. She nodded again. I let money talk louder than love, and once the words were out, I didn't know how to take them back. So I left. Coward's way. Her confession filled the room like incense, heavy, lingering, impossible to ignore. I remembered the day after Margaret's funeral, when Evelyn and I had shouted across this very table, accusing, dividing what was left instead of clinging to each other. I remembered slamming the door, swearing we were finished, and maybe we had been, until now. "I heard about Michael," she said softly. "Word gets around. When I realized he was trying to take the house from you, I thought, if even he can wound you, then what am I doing carrying mine like a badge?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the sister who'd betrayed me, but the girl who used to sneak peaches from the orchard with me, the one who tied wildflowers into Margaret's hair at my wedding, the one who cried the day I left for my first job out of town. The silence stretched until she whispered, "I'm sorry, Arthur. I should have come sooner." My throat tightened, but my voice was steady. "We wasted years, Evelyn. Years we don't get back." Her eyes brimmed. "Then let's not waste what's left." The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, a stray wind rattled the gate. I pushed the folder aside and reached across the table, my hand covering hers. For a moment, she froze. Then her fingers closed around mine with a strength that surprised me. We didn't need to say more. We sat there, two old souls who had finally remembered what mattered. Later, I made us a simple supper: bread, cheese, tomatoes from the garden. She laughed softly as she buttered her slice. "You still cut the bread too thick," she teased. "And you still talk too much," I replied. And for the first time in 15 years, we both laughed without bitterness. When she left that night, I walked her to the gate. She turned, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Don't disappear again, brother." I nodded. Neither should you. I watched her taillights vanish down the street, and the quiet of the house felt different this time. Not heavy, but cleansed, as though another door inside me had been unlatched. I sat back in the rocking chair on the porch, the new keys jingling in my pocket, the folder safe inside. I thought of Michael's tears, Claire's steady hand, Evelyn's return. For the first time, the fractures of my family felt like they might be mending. But deep down, I knew one last door remained closed. The most important one, Margaret's. And until I faced her memory properly, none of this would be complete. The next morning, before dawn had colored the sky, I reached for the oldest key in my drawer, the one that no longer opened any door in this house. A key from my father's toolbox, iron-worn smooth by time. I slipped it into my pocket and whispered, "Today, love, I'll bring you what's left." Because the final lock I had to turn was waiting in a place no living hands could open. I woke before the sun, the house wrapped in that pale blue silence that only comes before dawn. The kettle hissed, the coffee steamed, and the keys on the table caught the first timid light like small coins scattered by time. My hand reached not for the new ones, but for the oldest, iron-worn smooth, the key from my father's toolbox. It no longer fit any door here, but it carried the weight of every threshold I had ever crossed. I slipped it into my pocket and left the toast untouched. The street was still damp from the night, smelling of earth and leaves. Each step toward the cemetery felt both heavier and lighter, as if the key pulled me forward while the past finally loosened its grip. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. Rows of stones stood in silence, each one a door into memory. I walked the familiar path, slower than usual, until I reached the far corner where her name waited for me. Margaret Bennett. The letters were soft with years, but they still held her voice if I let them. I removed my hat, stood there with the cool morning pressing against my face, and whispered, "I've closed every door I needed to close, except this one." The air stirred. A sparrow darted from one stone to another. I knelt, the old bones of my knees protesting, and placed the key gently on the white marble. It looked so small against the stone, yet it carried a weight words could never carry. "This is yours," I said. "You kept our home alive when I only knew how to build it. You kept me standing when I was too tired to fight. And when Michael called me useless, when Evelyn and I had broken apart, when even my own heart locked itself away, you were still the reason I remembered I had worth." I paused, my throat thick, my eyes stinging. "Now, Margaret, the house is safe. The children are learning. Even Evelyn came back. But most of all, I've learned to guard myself, not just bricks and gates. And this key, this last key, is proof that not every lock needs opening again. Some just need resting." The wind moved through the trees, rustling like a soft reply. I closed my eyes and let the sound carry through me. For the first time in years, there was no heaviness, only peace. When I rose, the key stayed on the stone. I touched the letters of her name one last time and whispered, "I'll keep the door open in my heart, but no one enters without respect." Walking back, the town looked different. The houses were the same, the streets unchanged, but something inside me had shifted. The locks at home were strong, but stronger still was the boundary I had built within myself. At the porch, I didn't fumble with the keys. I left the gate wide, let the morning sun fall across the rocking chair, and sat with a fresh cup of coffee. The birds sang louder than usual, or maybe I was just listening better. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for footsteps on the path, or for knocks on the door, or for papers slipped under the frame. I wasn't waiting at all. I was home, and every door that mattered was finally at peace. If this story moved you in any way, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment below, I read every single one, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Your support helps us keep sharing voices that deserve to be heard.